London in the early 1900s was a city of contradictions, the beating heart of a vast empire and one of the largest cities in the world, yet a place of poverty, struggle, innovation, and transformation. By 1900, an estimated 6.5 million people called London home. About 1/5 of the entire population of Great Britain lived within the city's sprawling boundary. It was a time before World War I, when horse-drawn vehicles still shared space on the streets with new motor cars, when electric trams and underground railways were transforming transport, and when the rigid divisions of class life shaped daily routines, work, food, and entertainment. The city in 1900 was enormous, crowded, noisy, and pulsing with life. On the surface, London was a city of grand architecture, imposing government buildings, magnificent theaters in the West End, and elegant homes in affluent neighborhoods like Mayfair, Kensington, and Westminster. But beyond these polished facades lay tangled streets of dense housing where millions struggled to survive. As horse-drawn omnibuses clattered over cobblestones and motor vehicles began to appear, electric trams and the expanding London Underground began stitching the city together, making distant suburbs accessible to workers and the middle class. These transport innovations meant that people could now live farther from their workplaces and commute to the heart of London each day, an early form of metropolitan life as we know it today. Life on the streets was vibrant and often chaotic. Loud market sellers, street musicians, costermongers selling vegetables, fruit, or fish, and chimney sweeps filled the busy thoroughfares. Yet alongside this vibrant energy were the harsh realities of pollution, dust, and foul air. London's smog was a legend long before the famous 1950s events gave it the nickname the Big Smoke. Social class defined nearly every aspect of life in London. The wealthy upper classes enjoyed a comfortable existence with grand homes, indoor plumbing, multiple servants, sumptuous meals, and leisure. Women of the upper class hosted afternoon teas with delicate cakes and sandwiches, while the men spent their days in private clubs, boardrooms, or managing estates. Middle-class families, merchants, professionals, government clerks, lived reasonably comfortably. They usually possessed servants, sent their children to school, and had access to a variety of consumer goods that were becoming increasingly commonplace due to industrial production and empire-wide trade. For working-class families, life was far more difficult. Most worked long hours for low wages in factories, docks, or workshops. Women did laundry, cleaned homes, took in sewing or laundry, and raised children on tight budgets. Children often worked too, in shops, factories, or as street sellers, because education was not yet mandatory until later reforms took hold. Houses in poorer districts, especially the East End around places like Whitechapel or Spitalfields, were overcrowded, damp, and lacking basic sanitation. Multiple family members often lived in 1 or 2 rooms, making privacy and comfort luxuries the poor could rarely afford. Now let's talk about the food culture in London. What people ate in London varied wildly depending on class and income. For wealthier families, meals were elaborate and plentiful. Roast meats, puddings, fresh fruits imported from across the globe, and imported tea served in fine china. The British Empire's global reach made exotic foods and spices more accessible than ever, enriching London's food culture. Meanwhile, the working class often survived on simple, inexpensive meals. Typical diet staples included tea with a little milk with sugar, bread with margarine or dripping, boiled potatoes, and inexpensive pies. In East London, pie and mash, a simple dish of meat pie with mashed potato, became an affordable favorite, enjoyed hot on cold days. For the very poorest, subsistence was precarious. Interviews recorded from working families in London between 1909 and 1913 show that many lived on weak tea and bread with margarine because their weekly income, often around just £1, barely covered rent, fuel, and the bare essentials. Let's talk about the business industry. London's economy in the early 1900s was dynamic and far-reaching. The city was a powerful center of global finance, trade, and industry. Tall office buildings housed major banks, insurance companies, and global trading houses that connected Britain with tea from India, spices from the Caribbean, and manufactured goods from factories in Manchester, Birmingham, and Glasgow. Factories within London itself, especially in industrial districts and near docks, employed thousands in clothing, footwear, metalwork, and machinery. Dock workers labored tirelessly on the Thames, unloading cargo. The Port of London was one of the largest employers in the city. Class tensions were already visible in the labor movements of the period. Workers began organizing more effectively into unions, and strikes, such as the music hall strike of 1907, saw theatrical workers and performers fight for better pay and conditions, ultimately securing improvements in minimum wages and hours.
Despite hardships, Londoners sought leisure and amusement. Musical halls were a major source of entertainment, especially for working-class crowds. Performers sang popular songs, comedy acts amused crowds, and nights of laughter and socializing offered a release from the grind of daily work. The West End Theatre District thrived with plays, operas, and drama, attracting both locals and visitors. Early silent films also began to appear in modest picture houses, drawing curious crowds eager to experience this new form of entertainment. Parks like Hyde Park, Regent's Park, and Victoria Park became social hubs where families picnicked, took boat rides, and attended open-air concerts. London's sporting culture was also emerging, with football leagues gaining popularity and local teams drawing passionate crowds.
Education, reform, and public life was also growing that time. In early 1900s, London was a city still wrestling with social reform. Education was expanding. The London County Council took responsibility for schools in 1903, meaning thousands of children began to receive formal education rather than being sent to work. Charitable efforts like Ragged Schools provided free education, meals, and clothes to destitute children in the poorest areas. Political movements were gathering momentum too. Women's suffrage campaigns intensified, demanding voting rights for women and equality in public life. Labor movements pushed for better working conditions, wages, and rights for all workers, setting the stage for future social reforms.
Public health was a serious concern. Even after improvements in sewer systems and water supply in the late 19th century, many poor neighborhoods still lacked proper sanitation and clean water. Diseases like tuberculosis were common, and child mortality remained high compared to today. Hospitals existed, but access was limited for the poor. Charitable institutions like the London Hospital provided vital care for those who could not afford private medical services. London was already a diverse city, with immigrants from across Europe and the British Empire. Jewish families fleeing persecution in Eastern Europe settled in districts like Whitechapel and Spitalfields, building tight-knit communities and businesses in tailoring and trade. Irish workers contributed significantly to construction and labor sectors. This cultural mix enriched London's food, music, religion, and community life. Markets and streets echoed with many languages and traditions, a precursor to the vibrant, multicultural London that would emerge in later decades.
Advances in electricity, communication, and transport were reshaping everyday life. Electric street lighting and underground railways extended city activity into the night. Telegraph communication connected businesses, families, and news networks across continents. By the early 1900s, London was unlike any city before. It was noisy, industrial, expanding, and modern.
London at the turn of the century was not static. It was a city preparing for massive change. Tensions in Europe were rising, labor movements were growing, and ordinary people were beginning to demand rights and reforms that would transform society forever. In the years before World War I, London stood as a testament to the power and complexity of modern urban life. A city of innovation, inequality, hardship, hope, and relentless energy. It was a place where horse-drawn carts still crossed paths with electric trams, where wealthy merchants rubbed shoulders with dock workers and immigrants from across the world. It was a city that embodied both the promise and contradictions of the new century. If you like this reconstruction video of London, then give this video a like and subscribe to this channel.